what do you have now? We in terms of other relations that the Ukraine-Russian conflict and of course the European now we know Macron is coming to China in April. We have seen Scholz has come, German Chancellor. We have a high season now of visiting of head of state diplomacy is after Chinese New Year is running again. We have a new cohort of government officials will be in next month. So we probably will see a lot of things happening. So from your observer as a China hand and senior expert on China-US relations, what do you expect on those global issues, economic issues, and U.S.-China cooperation in the years ahead? Susan, please.
Yeah, well, I think you raised a number of really important points, Henry. I mean, we've had this last 5 years have been a pretty difficult road in U.S.-China relations, but let's not forget that most of those years coincided with COVID-19. So we were having absolutely no face-to-face communications, all kinds of problems. We had to evacuate our embassy, on and on. So we had that issue. And then we also had the Russian invasion of Ukraine and all of the dislocation that's happened in the world because of that, and also strained relations in the UN and in other multilateral organizations. So we had, a couple of big exogenous events that have really impinged on our ability to work together on some of these constructive areas. And I think it's very frustrating for people, in both countries who are looking, for some kind of indicators about, hopefulness for the future, working on some of these global problems, getting some progress. So I really do subscribe still to the co-evolution notion that, in order to have, the kind of world, we're still going to remain linked. We're not going to decouple. I think everybody's pretty much now agreed that decoupling is not really in the cards. And if anything shows it, it's this, $700 billion record trade that was exchanged between the US and China last year that the Commerce Department published about yesterday. So we're going to remain linked, and we have to work on these problems. And in order to work on these problems, we each need to make adjustments in order to be able to work together better. And I would say, we need to have more transparency in the relationship, because that's going to help us with this constantly assuming the worst about the other. If we know more about how the Chinese system works, if we can understand better how the decision-making process works, we can get confidence about how things are going to unfold in certain situations, and that will make us, less worried about a potential threat or challenge. So I think both sides need to be a lot more reassured about the other side's intentions, and the way to do that is to get better information and open up a little bit on the information. I think on this balloon incident, just to go back to that briefly, more openness and more transparency about how things are happening and what are the problems in providing information, if that could be done. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about the two systems on each side, and I think we need to work on that. But if we can do that, I think real adjustments can be made, and we can work together better over time and try to solve some of these issues. I'm very interested in the provision of global public goods. And we've been talking a lot recently about debt relief. There's an emerging markets debt crisis that is unfolding before our eyes, and China and all of the international financial institutions, private creditors, and members of the Paris Club are all involved in those debt workouts. And we need new mechanisms and new processes to make these things work better for countries and for people in the world. And I think, this is the way we're going to have to move forward. We're not going to be able to just exclude each other and have two parallel systems. That's not going to work. We need to be within one system, coexisting, co-evolving, and cooperating, while we compete. I mean, there's no question we'll also be competing, but it's not something we need to be so afraid of.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree that you said, we shouldn't decouple. I mean, that's throughout my dialogue with so many opinion leaders in the U.S. and Europe. I mean, nobody favors decoupling. But yet, I think we still need, as I said, we need more understanding and the clarification and the communication. Of course, now there's about over 1,000 Chinese companies now on the entity list, and also we have a CHIPS Act, and now the CHIPS is kind of U.S. is restricted on selling to China. So there's a lot of things we need to really talk in, because as you said, we have a 700 billion annual trade between us. I mean, we are already totally intertwined, and China, if China is doing well, it's contribute over a third of global GDP growth. It's beneficial to the U.S. as well. It's proving that the U.S. Which led this system in seven decades has been working. Let's enhance it, improve it, and let China play more active role there. So Doug, what's your maybe last phrase of our dialogue that you want to add on this China-U.S. and the global governance as well?
Well, I think that both of our countries have worked hard to lower expectations for the future. I think the world will breathe a great sigh of relief if we stop making things worse and can sort of stabilize where we're at. My goal would be to instruct each traveling minister or secretary of the cabinet to have one outcome of a consequential nature. Small is better than nothing. Large would be great, but let's be realistic and have something accomplished. During Yellen's visit, for example, we've talked about the Club of Rome, which is a big issue for me. China has all but become a member of the Club of Rome, its own internal and international practices, as it's experienced more as a creditor nation in these difficult investment environments around the world. And getting closer to the Club of Paris and finding a way to articulate that would be a concrete result of a visit by Janet Yellen. And then as each subsequent visitor goes back and forth, try to find something that says, well, at least they can get the minimum done, get a little bit of work done, and it's not continuing to spiral into the ground. I think that would be my high expectation for a year of low expectations.
Okay, great. We almost coming to the end, and what I think is 2023 will be a really a new year, which is we are out of the pandemic. I mean, almost, and now the world is geared up, and I'm glad that the U.S. President Biden, Chinese President Xi had this great summit in Bali, and they said they're going to have the working team work together, and we hope to put a floor there in building a floor for the China-U.S. relations. And now we still hope that Blinken can visit, as he said, as soon as possible, and then we'll have more probably U.S. Senior officials on trade, on investment, on the treasury, all visit China, and vice versa, and China ministers and vice premier visiting U.S. And let's also have a G20 summit in India in September that probably U.S. President, Chinese president can meet again, and also in APEC in November that both presidents can meet. So I see 2023 is crucial to put the floor and maybe elevate a bit, stabilize. Probably let's stabilize, not with big hope there, but let's stabilize that, so that we can not let it deteriorate and we can work together on more urgent multi-front on more important issues around us. So I don't know if you have any last word, and we will conclude, and maybe a final word from Susan and a final word from Douglas, and we'll conclude this very interesting, very informative dialogue, and we're also airing this in China, and we'll be really appreciative of all this, very informative dialogue. So, Susan, your last word, please.
Yeah, well, I think what I really hope could happen is that, I know that there are also sort of changes taking place internally in China in terms of the focus of the government on, really jumpstarting the economy again after the COVID opening, and giving more play to consumption, giving more play to the private sector and entrepreneurs. And I hope we could really get the international business people back in terms of being welcomed back to China and feeling like we're getting back to that kind of less securitized and more economically dynamic focus for sort of our economic relationship in both China and the US. But I think there are things that China could do to reassure the US that it's moving in a direction that is not going to be overly emphasizing top-down state control and that kind of thing. I think that would be really important. And it also seems to me that it dovetails with the Chinese government's now focus on the economy and what it needs to do. And I think for the US, that focus on our economy, getting it going, making sure it's dynamic, might also dovetail in this way with making sure that we're focused on growth and helping out other developing countries that are going to be running into trouble this year. And then I think my other thing I hope we can do this year, Henry, is somehow have some kind of effort to head off further fighting in Ukraine with this Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I know you've written on that, and I appreciate that, but this is a huge issue for the international community, and it's going to drag. If it drags on, it'll continue to really damage other countries and damage the economy around the world. So I hope those are two areas where I hope we can make progress this year.
That's great. Yeah, we all have to concentrate more domestically. I know China have a Central Economic Work Meeting that emphasize a lot of a new platform and private sectors and stimulating more economic development in China. So and also U.S. now is putting more by President Biden also emphasize a bit more on the domestic infrastructure and things like that.